A brief history of the drug war. There's a video, but I'm not gonna play it. Um, right, here we go. The early stages of drug prohibition. Many current illegal drugs, such as marijuana, opium, coca, and psychedelics, have been used for thousands of years for both medical and spiritual purposes. So, why are some drugs legal and other drugs illegal today? It's not based on any scientific assessment of the relative risk of these drugs, but it has everything to do with who is associated with these drugs. The first anti opium laws in the 1870s were directed at Chinese immigrants. The first anti cocaine laws in the early 1900s were directed at black men in the South. The first anti marijuana laws in the Midwest and the Southwest in, in the 1910s and 20s were directed at Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans. Today, Latino and especially black communities are still subject to widely disproportional drug enforcement and sentencing practices. Nixon, the generation gap. In the 1960s, as drugs became symbols of youthful rebellion, social upheaval, and political dissent, the government halted scientific research to evaluate these medical safety and efficacies. Efficacies. I don't know how to say that word. In June 1971, President Nixon declared a war on drugs. He dramatically increased the size and presence of federal drugs control agencies and pushed through measures such as mandatory sentencing and no knock warrants. A top Nixon aide, John Enrichman, later admitted, "You want to know what this was really about? You want to know what this was really all about?" The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Nixon temporarily placed marijuana in Schedule 1, the most restricted category of drugs, pending review by a commission he appointed, led by Republicans. Pennsylvania Governor Raymond Schaffer. I think it's Schaffer. I mean, do you hear that? Do you understand I mean, just getting that news and nothing has changed is beyond. It just shows how slow the government is to respond to things. I mean, right now all we're talking about is marijuana. We should be talking about all drugs. I mean, Colorado just passed a law for mushrooms, psychedelics. All drugs should be legal. That's my take on it. And especially after hearing this, the guy that started the war on drugs was the guy that did it just to lock up hippies and black people. In 1972, The commission anonymously recommended decriminalization, the possession and wow, I'm really messing up words. Distributions of marijuana for personal use. Nixon ignored the report and rejected its recommendations. Between 1973 and 1977, however, 11 states decriminalized marijuana possession. In January 1977, President Jimmy Carter was inaugurated on a campaign platform that included marijuana decriminalization. In October 1977, the Senate Judicial Committee voted to decriminalize possession of up to an ounce of marijuana for personal use. Within just a few years, though, the tide has shifted and proposals to decriminalize marijuana were abandoned as parents became increasingly concerned about high rates of teen marijuana use. Marijuana was ultimately caught up in a broad cultural backlash against the perceived permissions of the 1970s. The 1980s and 90s. Drug hysterical and skyrocketing incarceration rates. The president of Ronald Reagan marked the start of a long period of skyrocketing rates of incarceration, largely thanks to his unprecedented expansion of the drug war. The number of people behind bars for nonviolent drug laws offenses increased from 50,000 in 1980 to over 400,000 by 1997. Public concerns about illicit drugs use built throughout the 1980s, largely due to media portrayals of people addicted to the smokable form of cocaine, dubbed crack. Soon after Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, his wife Nancy Reagan began a highly publicized anti-drug campaign, coining the slogan "Just Say No." This set the stage for the zero-tolerance policy implemented in the mid to late 1980s. Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates, who believed that casual drug users should be taken out and shot, founded the DARE drug education program, which was quickly adopted nationwide despite the lack of evidence of its effectiveness. The increasingly harsh drug policies also blocked the expansion of syringes, access programs, and other harm reduction policies to reduce the rapid spread of HIV and AIDS. See, I remember DARE. I even had a DARE t-shirt. And the Just Say No program, I remember that too. Oh man. I remember we'd have speakers come in and they'd say, "Remember kids, don't say no to drugs." Like speakers would come in and just say no, They would say that. The propaganda we had as kids is not funny. The propaganda. Anyway, I digress. In the late 1980s, a politician hysterical about drugs led to the passage of draconian penalties in Congress and state legislation that rapidly increased the prison population. In 1985, the proportion of Americans polled who saw drug abuse as the nation's #1 problem was just 2 to 6%. The figures grew through the remainder of the 1980s until, in September 1989, it reached a remarkable 64%. One of the most intense fixations by the American public on any issue in polling history. Within less than a year, however, the figures plummeted to less than 10% as the media lost interest. The draconian policies enacted during the hysterical remains, however, and continues to to result in escalating levels of arrest and incarceration. Although Bill Clinton advocated for treatment instead of incarceration during his 1992 presidential campaign, after his first few months in the White House, he reverted to the drug war strategy of his Republican procedures by continuing to escalate the drug war. Notoriously, Clinton rejected a U.S. sentencing commission recommending eliminating the disparity between crack and powder cocaine sentences. See, and that's crazy because Bill Clinton, he even said, I smoked marijuana. So he did drugs and he still didn't, he still was hard on drugs. He was still hard on people that did drugs, you know. Why? You did drugs yourself. But I digress. I like saying that. He also rejected, with the encouragement of drug Carzier General Beryl McCaffrey, Health Secretary Donald Sheila's advice to end the federal ban on funding for syringes access programs. Yet a month before leaving office, Clinton asserted in a Rolling Stone interview that we really need a re-examination of our entire policy on imprisonment of people who use drugs, and said that marijuana use should be decriminalized. Oh, well, I guess he did care a little bit, huh? But it's always after they get out of office that they decide to say, oh well, I wish the government would change, but I didn't care to change it when I was in office. You know. At the height of the drug war, hysteria in the late 1980s and early 1990s, a movement emerged seeking a new approach to drug policy. In 1987, Arnold Trebach and Kevin Zees founded the Drug Policy Foundation, describing it as the loyal opposition to the war on drugs. Prompted conservatives such as William Buckley and Milton Friedman had long advocated that for ending drug prohibition, as had civil libertarians such as longtime ACLU executive director Ira Glasser. In the late 1980s, they were joined by Baltimore Mayor Kurt Suchmunk, federal judge Robert Sweet, Princeton professor Ethan Nalbandian, I'm really, and other activities, scholars, and policymakers. In 1994, Nalbandian founded the Lynn Smith Center as the first U.S. project of George Soros Open Society Institute. In 2000, the Groningen Center merged with the Drug Policy Foundation to create the Drug Policy Alliance. The new millennium, the pendulum shifts slowly towards sensible drug policies. George Washington Bush arrived in the White House as the drug war was running out of steam, yet he allocated more money than ever to it. His drug Carzier John Walters zealously focused on marijuana and launched a major campaign to promote student drug testing. While rates of illicit drugs use remained constant, overdose fatality rose rapidly. The era of George Washington Bush also witnessed the rapid escalation of militarization of domestic drug law enforcement. By the end of Bush terms, there were about 40,000 paramilitary-style SWAT raids on Americans every year. mostly for nonviolent drug law offenses, often misdemeanors, while federal reform mostly stalled under Bush. The state level reforms finally began to slow the growth of the drug war. Now, he wanted to give people, um, kids, drug tests for marijuana when this guy smokes marijuana. And there was a story that I heard that he crashed a truck into a bowling alley while he was high on cocaine and was drinking. That's the story I heard that happened to him. Yet he is so hard on drugs. This it's just this. Every politician is on this whim of wherever the breeze is going. That's where I'm headed. Whatever the mainstream idea is, that's what I'm going to do. But if it has anything to do with the average folk that want something done, it's not going to happen. But I digress. Anyway, alright, where am I at? Politicians now routinely admit to having used marijuana and even cocaine when they were younger. When Michael Bloomberg was questioned during his 2001 mayor campaign about whether he had ever used marijuana, he said, "You bet I did, and I enjoyed it." Barack Obama also candidly discussed his prior cocaine and marijuana use when I was a kid. I inhaled frequently, that was the point. Public opinion has shifted dramatically in favor of sensible reform that expands health-based approaches while reducing the role of criminalization in drug policies. Marijuana reform has gained unprecedented momentum throughout the Americas, Alaska, California, Colorado, Nevada, Orlando, a whole bunch of states. In December 2013, Argentina, Araga, I guess, I don't know, became the first country in the world to legally regulate marijuana. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau plans to legalize marijuana for adults by 2018. Yes, Canada has legalized marijuana. This is kind of old and outdated. It's legal. In response to a worsening overdose epidemic, dozens of U.S. states passed laws to increase access to the overdose antidote naloxone, as well as 9/11 Good Samaritans laws to encourage people to seek medical help in the event of an overdose. Yet the assault on American citizens in other countries in others continues, with 700,000 people still arrested for marijuana offenses each year and almost 500,000 people still behind bars for nothing more than a drug law violation. President Obama, despite supporting several successful policy changes such as reducing the crack powder sentencing disparity, ending the ban on federal funding for syringes access programs, and ending federal interference with state medical marijuana laws, did not shift the majority of drug policy funding to a health-based approach. Now the new administration is threatening to take us backwards towards a 1980s style drug war. President Trump is calling for a wall to keep drugs out of the country, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions has made it clear that he does not support the sovereignty of state to legalize marijuana and believes good people don't smoke marijuana. Well, I got good news for you. Jeff, you're out of here. He really is out of here. Jeff Sessions is gone. Someone else replaced him, I think. I believe. He is out of the White House, so we don't have to worry about him and his stupid ideas. Progress is inevitably slow, and even with an administration hostile to reform, there is still unprecedented, unprecedented momentum behind drug policies reforms in states and localities across the country. The Drug Policy Alliance and its allies will continue to advocate for health-based reforms such as marijuana legalization, drug decriminalization, safe consumption sites, naloxone access, and bail reform, and more. We look forward to a future where drug policies are shaped by science and compassion rather than political hysteria. 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 I think I finally got that word right. All right, kids. So, yeah. All right. So that's the brief history of the war on drugs. Just that we just read. Hope you learned something. I learned nothing because it's pretty much my life. Because I lived through all those times except for the 1800s. And, I didn't live through the 70s and 60s, but I knew the history, so yeah. But I could talk on the history I have been here, and it's been messed up. I've heard my grandpa say, "You don't smoke marijuana, it's bad for you." I've heard my mom say, "You can smoke marijuana." I've heard my dad say, "You can drink," but nobody's really like in onto it, I don't know. Well, tell me what you think about the war on drugs in the comments below. This is J.E. Vision, and I'm out.